Hello viewers and a very warm welcome. You're watching the brand new edition of To The Point with your host Kriti Mishra. The Department of Biotechnology has been at the helm of the government's efforts to boost vaccine development and testing in India during this COVID-19 pandemic. The Department of Biotechnology leads the government's Mission COVID Suraksha, or Indian COVID-19 vaccine development mission. It has prepared clinical trial sites across the country that is helping vaccine developers test the vaccine candidates quickly and make them available to us. And joining today on the program, DBT Secretary, Dr. Renu Swarup. Ma'am, welcome to Sansad TV and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kriti. Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And first and foremost, of course, vaccination is an integral part of government's comprehensive strategy for containment and management of the pandemic, of course, along with test, track and treat and COVID-appropriate behavior. Ma'am, tell us about the efforts being ramped up for massive production of vaccines to make them available in the shortest possible time.
Thank you, Kriti. As you know, the government has been fully committed to bring out a large number of vaccines, safe, efficacious for our population. And these efforts have been on for some time. In fact, since the pandemic began, our researchers from the institutes, from the industry have been working very hard to be able to bring out these vaccines. You also know that we have shared with everyone, we are one of these countries in which we have a portfolio of vaccine candidates to be rolled out. We already have 2 of our own candidates which have got their emergency use authorization, and the third one, Sputnik, which has also been now developed in partnership in the trials with the Government of India, has also received its emergency use authorization. So there is full effort to see how the production of these is ramped up, and more importantly, how do we get our other vaccines which are in the pipeline accelerated in terms of their development, in terms of their clinical trials, so that we could very quickly bring them towards emergency use authorization to be made available for our immunization program.
Absolutely.
This whole effort that we have done is not just to see that we take the R&D stage till clinical trials, but it is also to see how we ramp up their manufacturing capacities. And I think that is really the main effort that we are trying to put in now with even those which are out in the immunization program. So as you know, we have 2 of our vaccines, the Covishield, which is being manufactured by Serum, which is in license from the AstraZeneca, and they have already ramped up their production facilities. They're also, the government is facilitating them by giving them some advance purchase orders so that through that investment they can further ramp up their facilities, and they have shared their ramp up plans with the Ministry of Health. In terms of the Covaxin, which is the the technology which is of ICMR and Bharat Biotech, that is a complex technology because it's a live and activated virus. It is a BSL-3 requirement, and also considering that Bharat Biotech's initial production capacity was limited. So a lot of effort has been made over many months now since the licensure happened, the emergency use licensure happened. We have worked with them to see how we can help them to ramp it up at their own facility and also through tech transfer with other facilities. So currently, Bharat Biotech has now been able to develop a plan in which they are in their own Hyderabad facilities, they are ramping up production. In addition, they have a facility which is coming up in the outskirts of Bangalore, where again, this is a facility which is a BSL-3 facility with large bioreactors, and that will immediately be able to scale up their production many-fold. In addition, we have had tech transfers which have happened with the MOUs have been signed and tech transfers have been initiated with the Institute Indian Immunologicals, which is a company under the National Dairy Development Board, the Hafkin Biopharmaceuticals Limited, Maharashtra State Government Public Sector Undertaking, the BIPCOL, which is a Department of Biotechnology Public Sector Undertaking. So these 3 also we have now been able to take this ahead in terms of their agreements to be signed and activities to begin. And these collectively now have given us an indication that their production capacities starting from July onwards will increase, and these numbers we've been sharing constantly with the Ministry of Health and with the Empowered Group to take them ahead. We are also working to see how this technology transfer can be done with other groups. And in fact, just a couple of days back, they have also signed up an MOU with the Gujarat Consortium. And the Gujarat Consortium has the Gujarat state government, but it also has two other companies with it, which will then take this in the form of a consortium. Similarly, we are identifying any other private sector companies who have the capacities, who have BSL-3, they have competence, and they can come forward to work with us to take it ahead. So that's for Covaxin. All efforts are being made by the government to facilitate this tech transfer and take it forward. But we are also doing similar efforts with Sputnik. And Sputnik has, in fact, the RDIF, which is their key team in Russia, has already worked through the Dr. Reddy's laboratory here with a large number of manufacturers to take on the manufacturing of Sputnik, so that we have large numbers that we can produce over these next couple of months. And these manufacturers, we have 6 of them who have come forward. Then again, their tech transfers have been done. They've started their process at different stages because they came in at different stages. But the government is making all effort to facilitate their regulation, facilitate all the regulatory approvals which are required to accelerate this, and wherever required, any other facilitation in terms of the technical aspects, etc., to see that we can help them to bring out large number of vaccines for our citizens in the immunization program.
Dr. Swarup, as you said about transfer of technology, now we understand that vaccine development or vaccine manufacturing is a very, very complex task. So is the transfer of technology. What does it take to identify such units? How cumbersome is the process? I'd like to understand.
So yes, vaccine development is a complex process, and being a biological material makes it all the more complex because you're talking about a biological material. So when you put it through the process development, there could be different variables into it. There could be different risk factors into its whole scale up, etc. So first and foremost, you need to have a very, very well trained, skilled human resource who can take on this technology, adapt it, adopt it, and be able to implement it with the same fineness which is required to take the process forward in terms of vaccine production. So it's not just an SOP which needs to be written and handed over to somebody. It has very minute details in it because it's all about a biological material scale up. We have to make sure there's no contamination. We have to make sure that the sterility stays in place. And keeping all that in place, the yield is what we would want it to be at the end, because that's really what's going to roll out the end product. In the case of Covaxin, we're talking about a live virus, which needs to be then inactivated and then taken forward. Now, this makes it all the more complex because you need an infrastructure, which is required specifically for that, and that's a BSL-3 infrastructure. We do have a large number of BSL-3s within the country, but those are all for research purpose. Looking at a BSL-3, which goes for manufacturing, has its own complexities and requirements. But having said that, I think we've been able to very quickly, as I said, identify those which can take it forward, map those which are currently there and can be sort of can be taken on in terms of whatever refurbishments or refinements in their existing infrastructure to be able to take on, because some of them are in animal vaccines. Some of these facilities which exist are those which are making animal vaccines. Now, if you're making an animal vaccine, you do need to bring in a lot of changes if you have to make a human vaccine. So those changes again require certain modifications, etc., which are time consuming. But there is full effort at this mapping exercise that we have done in terms of the competence and the capacities to be able to take it forward. We will be able to scale it up. Yes, it's taking some time in some places, but we are very confident that what we have put out into our targets will be met, not just on time, but our effort is to see we meet them well before time.
Absolutely, ma'am. We do hope that our targets are met. But given the mutations of the virus, ma'am, we understand that India has also undertaken aggressive genome sequencing. What does that mean when we say genome sequencing of the virus for development of vaccines and for the efficacy of the vaccines?
So let's understand first what is a mutation and what does it mean for a virus like the SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus which causes the infection for COVID. Viruses, by their nature, by their biology, are known to mutate. There could be different reasons why they mutate, but it's not a new phenomenon. We know that viruses will mutate. There could be different reasons for it. There could be pressures on it currently. There are immune pressures. There are pressures of the large number of infections which are there. And because of it, the large number of hosts through which they are being transmitted. So it's a large number of passages through which it is going. So many different pressures, many reasons. And it's also just as I said, the part of the evolution of the virus that it mutates. Now, the genome sequencing that we are doing is basically bringing in the molecular surveillance, which has to be linked with the epidemiological surveillance. So our sequencing laboratories, which are doing this genome sequencing, a consortia was set up, which is called INSACOG, the Indian SARS-CoV Genome Sequencing Consortium, which is by the Health Ministry, Department of Biotechnology, ICMR, CSIR. And now we've expanded it to bring in the Department of Science and Technology, the Ministry of Education, some ICERs, Indian Institute of Science, various organizations who can come forward, who again have the capacities to be able to do genome sequencing at the speed at which we would want to see the data coming in. The samples are coming in from the states. So the NCDC, which is the main sort of convener for this, has been able to link it up. They bring the samples as per the sampling strategies which they've put out from different districts, from different states. These samples get sequenced. Once they get sequenced, we find mutations. But there could be many mutations which are found when we are doing the sequencing. Every mutation would not be a matter of concern for us. There are certain mutations on certain specific regions of that sequence which are a matter of concern. And those mutations or those variants which they identify become variants under investigation. We investigate them, we clinically correlate them, and the clinical correlations go back to the state level where the samples come from. What is the transmission rate? What is the severity rate? How is it impacting the vaccines? How is it impacting the diagnostics? How is it going to be overall impact the public health issues? That information is then shared with the state governments so that they know that this is a variant under investigation. After we get this clinical correlated data, if there is a data which is going to have some implications on public health, then it gets notified as a variant of concern. Like from India, we've got the B1617, which has now been notified as a variant of concern. Before that, we started this genome sequencing when we had the B117, and then we had the B1351, the P1, which all were a matter of concern for us. We had more of B117 in the country, and that was initially what came in as a variant, and now, of course, the 617 as well. So what we are parallelly doing is these variants and the viruses have been isolated, they've been cultured, we have repositories, and we do have the capacities in the country to be able to culture them. We culture these viruses, we develop what we call assays, neutralizing assays on them. And then the vaccines that we have are then put through these assays. We run them through these assays to know what the efficacy of these vaccines is, how are they going to impact. These studies are currently happening while we speak. We have initial data, we have data from India, we have data from Public Health England, because that variant is found all over the world. It may be identified first in one country, but you find it all over. So that is happening. But what you also asked me is, what happens to the vaccines?
Yes.
So it's very important for our viewers to understand this, that each vaccine manufacturer has already built it into their strategy on how they would have to tweak the vaccines to be able to respond to that particular variant. While we know that the data which is with us, in certain cases, yes, the initial data shows that there is a slightly lowered efficacy for some of the vaccines vis-a-vis some of the variants. But the effort is, when we started with COVID, the original wild type, that is called the original strain, how these vaccines were made with that sequence, they have already started now working to see how they would be able to handle at least the current ones. Now, we don't know moving forward, there are different variants that would come in, there would be different information. But what these vaccine manufacturers are doing, they're looking at the sequence data, which can then address all important mutations which may come in. So we know which are those important sites which need to be targeted. And so they're already working on those. And each of them, including the ones which are in India, all our vaccines which are in the pipeline, are working to see that their vaccines remain effective against any mutation or any new variant that comes in.
Thank you so much, Dr. Swarup. You explained that in a very lucid manner to a lot of us who do not understand what genome sequencing would mean. But ma'am, besides these three vaccines that you're talking about, there is promising pipeline of 4 to 5 candidates in advanced clinical stages of development. Are there any kind of timelines that you're looking at for the rollout? And specifically, if I may also ask about Sputnik's one-dose jab?
So we do have a timeline, and the timeline is basically we have a number of them which are advanced right now, our own indigenous vaccines which are being developed. And we have the biological E candidate, which is a subunit protein candidate, which is in phase 3 right now, the Zydus Cadila, the DNA vaccine, which is again in the late stages of phase 3. In fact, now we feel that the data is at the stage where it's sort of more or less being analyzed, and they should be ready to go to the regulator very soon. We have a very interesting mRNA candidate being developed by our own company, Genova, which is likely to complete its phase 1 anytime now and get into the phase 2/3 trials, which again is not a very long timeline, because once they get into phase 2/3, an interesting candidate by Bharat Biotech of the nasal vaccine. So while they've delivered the co-vaccine to us, they're also parallelly working on the nasal vaccine. All these vaccines are in an advanced stage of development, and we hope in the next couple of months, in fact, when the government put out its plan for vaccines in the next few months till December, the production and the manufacture of these has already been factored into that, because we are confident that this will be able to take it on. Regarding the Sputnik single-dose vaccine, I think while Sputnik has got its clearances within the country for what is currently in their immunization, which has also been rolled out in our immunization, we still have to receive the data for their single dose. And I think once they have data, once they're confident that their data looks good and they can bring it to our regulator, I'm sure the regulator will give it an accelerated consideration, considering the fact that single-dose vaccine would definitely be a welcome vaccine for us to take forward.
Absolutely, ma'am. But moving on, we understand that repurposed and new molecules against COVID-19 are the top priority areas for research consortium, along with developing, of course, novel diagnostic kits and vaccines. What's the latest at that front that is happening in our country?
So we have supported a number of such candidates, and the Department of Biotechnology with its public sector BIRAC through the consortium that you mentioned, our COVID consortium, we've supported a number of those candidates. One of them, the one which Zydus just got its emergency use authorization for, the Verifin, has been one of the support that we've given. So you see it's already in the market now with an emergency use authorization. We also are supporting a number of groups, both industry and academia, to take up monoclonal antibodies, which are again important, and we hope that those results would be very encouraging. In addition, we do have some of the groups who are working on some of the natural products, when you're looking at extracts from the natural products, which can be screened through libraries and then converted into drugs. And that screening work with the Ministry of Ayush is also happening. But at the moment, we have to wait and watch and see how their data comes in. But in the next couple of months, we will see some good results rolling out in terms of this. But yes, it's definitely a priority, because if you're looking at prevention, we must look at the treatment as well. And I think this is what gives us our treatment solutions.
Absolutely, ma'am. But grants galore for innovative solutions to tackle COVID-19 by DBT. How are you encouraging out-of-box innovative ideas from the community to address this unseen enemy?
So grants is it's only a enabling and facilitation mechanism to be able to ignite young minds to look at newer ideas. And I think that's what we have tried to do through these facilitation mechanisms that we put out. We have actually been able to really bring forth our startups and our young innovators. We had different ways in which we could attract them, whether it was through these grants or putting together consortia or getting our incubation centers to be able to mobilize a lot of funding from CSR funds and others, which allow these young innovators to come forward. And it was very encouraging to see that we had nearly 1,500 solutions that were brought to that platform that was created. More than about 150 today, I'm told, are already in the market. And these range right from a PP to a N95 mask to sanitizers to sanitizing machines, and now oxygen concentrators. Our facility that we set up, the DBT Command Center at AMTZ Visakhapatnam, has now been able to roll out a large number of oxygen concentrators in this time of need that we had. Ventilators, diagnostic kits. I mean, the large number of diagnostic kits which are startups. Today we are self-reliant only because of those. We brought out the first mobile lab, infectious lab that we brought out. And that set out a model which now, of course, we have many more. Antigen kits. Because we had such excellent rapid antigen kits developed by our innovators, we could take that conscious decision that rapid antigen kits would be a part of the protocol that ICMR brought out because they had brought out such high levels of sensitivity and specificity. So huge number of ideas. We have tried to enable all of them, facilitate them, and many of them, as I said, are in the market.
Dr. Swarup, I understand that you have back-to-back meetings, but before we end this conversation, there are a lot of concerns about the third wave. How geared up are we to combat this third wave, if at all it was to happen?
So remember one thing, when coronavirus struck us, the SARS-CoV-2 struck us, we knew one thing, that it's a viral infection, it will mutate. The only behavior which can help it not to go forward is to cut the chain of transmission. To cut the chain of transmission, you need COVID appropriate behavior. Any number of variants would come in, any number of infections. We need to have social distancing. We need to have masks because that is what is going to protect the virus from either getting into you or you transmitting the virus to the other person. And hygiene. Whatever we may do, but yes, having said that, we are working, as you know, to make sure that all these solutions that are there are going to help, and they have already helped in looking at our testing, treating, and tracking, the three most important aspects that we talk about. So all these solutions would definitely continue for that. We will continue to be geared up for it. But let me reassure you that if the citizens come out and take this as their campaign to end the COVID, we can do it very quickly. Each citizen has to be responsible. Each citizen has to say, I am going to take a pledge that I'm not going to let me be a transmitter of this virus. And I'm sure we would be able to sort of do away with it. Also recognizing the fact that the virus will stay with us some time. So if we follow a responsible behavior, we'll all be able to handle this, whatever situation comes before us.
Ma'am, before we sign off, I do remember interviewing you last year also during the first wave and now as well. What is that biggest lesson that this pandemic has taught you through this very difficult phase?
The biggest lesson, of course, is what I just said, that if we have to tide over any crisis, we have to do it collectively, as a collective responsibility, And each one has to take on the responsibility and the onus of being able to fight this pandemic. The second most important lesson that has come to us is we've been able to deliver, and we have. We've done it through collaboration. And science, particularly, has come forward and delivered in collaboration with each other, nationally and globally. And if we continue to do this, we will be able to handle any major challenge that comes before us. So let's keep up this spirit of collaboration, but more importantly, let us continue to make sure that we are responsible collectively for any such challenge to overcome that.
And we'll be able to overcome any challenge that comes our way. On that note, Dr. Swarup, you joined us. Thank you so much for speaking to us, and all the best for your endeavors, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Kriti. Pleasure.